Hi, my name is Rachel Starkey and I'm here to give you a few tutorials on how to build your own facilitator kit. In our sessions for doing underwear, it's very easy as facilitators to already have pre-done process samples so that in a class, if you're not actually sewing, you can lift up what you're trying to talk about as a visual example to the participants who will then go home and make their pair of underwear from a t-shirt or from a pre-cut. So this is assuming a few things that you already have your designated underwear pattern. And in a different video, we've shown how you can make your own underwear pattern. So for the purposes of this video, this is a front and this is a back of the pair of underwear. And I've already gone ahead and I have pre-cut my underwear. So I won't show that in this video, but here is an example of the front and the back pre-cut. And this first process, I have literally only done the first process. And so I have stitched that and that process sample is complete for me so that when I'm in class, I can hold it up and saying, see, I have just stitched this front and back so that the participants can understand what is needed. But if there's not enough sewing machines or you don't want to take the time to hand stitch in the session, you can easily talk through the process. The next part of if we were making protective underwear would be to install a leak-proof shield. In a separate video, we have already shown how to make this shield. But in review, this is our pre-cut shield. And on a simple piece of paper, we have dotted out the general shape because in our particular shield, it has a front and a back depending on how it is. So it's just easy for marking to have the trace of the shield done. And then we have determined that we want our security bands to be 5 centimeters in. And so on our template, we've marked where we're gonna want the dot. And I can easily just take a shield and dot it. And then if I was doing a whole lot, I could take the next shield and dot it so that I have a whole lot that are pre-processed. The second step of that shield would be to cut ribbon. And we just bought ours locally, some sturdy satin type of ribbon in the market. There's many different things that you can use, even down to rolled up pieces of t-shirt. Anything that's going to be about a 1/2 centimeter in width, that is soft, that is secure, that won't unravel, that won't be rough against the skin. There's many different options. You could use elastic. It doesn't really matter, except that it just needs to be soft and non-irritating. So we have gone ahead and have pre-cut a bunch of our ribbon so that as we're making several of our facilitator kits today, we're all ready to go. And you can see it's just generous beyond the shield because we're going to just fold it over and then there's going to be 2 stitches for each end of the security band, resulting in the finished product of 2 stitches per end of the security band. It's well attached. It's not going to ravel. It looks finished. And this side, I have some extra here. If I was having an all-in-one and not sewing it into protective underwear, I could easily just trim this so that it looks a little bit more neat. Snaps are optional in the same way that I have marked where my security bands are. If I wanted snaps, I could already have a template so I know exactly where to mark so that my snaps are even, they're centered. If If snaps are desired, those are optional, because as we're going to show you in this tutorial, how we can now sew this inside a pair of underwear. So in my process samples, I have made one that is just stitched. The second step is I'm going to need 2 more process samples to finish out my whole process story, if you will. The second step is I have just rolled in the legs just a little to give it a finished look here. And so I went ahead and I've made 2 samples that have that finished edge. The end result is that this pair of underwear is seamless. So I'm only doing that step in the gusset area. The next process that we would undertake after we have made our front and back attach, and after we have pre-stitched just the leg area, I'm going to add the shield to that pair of underwear. Now I can decide, do I want the long part of the pad for like back bleeders to be near the back side, the bum, and the shorter part up here? Or depending on a woman's need, you could have it the other way. Personally, I recommend the longer side of the shield goes towards the back. That just helps for any back bleeding or backflow issues if it's just for protective underwear. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that there's no wrinkles. I want to lay this piece of underwear very flat. I've decided where I'm putting my shield, and that as well is flat and rested. There's no extra lumps. I just need it to be flat. I want it to be centered. I don't want it off skewed. So I'm just going to take my time and make sure I'm really happy with the placement. Generally, my security band is just past the front and back attach. So that's a good cue as to where I could place it. If it's too much this way, it's probably too much forward. So that's just a nice eyeball reminder for myself where might be the nicest place to place that shield. I like to just pin gently the top and the back so that the shield is in place once I have the placement of where I like it. Again, ensuring that this shield is extremely flat. All right. What we're going to do next, now that it is pinned securely, it's flat, I can flip it over. Okay. And trimming as I go, because some of your threads might be there. I'm going to make sure that it's nice and flat. I can see that it's basically symmetrical and it's flat. You can use a normal household sewing machine. You can use an industrial machine. You can even hand stitch this process. I am using just my home household sewing machine. So everything's flat. I see this is symmetrical. And I'm going to just sew on the very edge of the underwear. Just capturing it here, everything is nicely flat. I'm using a different contrast thread just so for you can see it easily. But if you have the same color thread, it can be less conspicuous. Just backing up that stitch. And the first side is now secure on the leg curve. Trimming my thread. You can see I've just secured it in space. I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. keeping everything flat and relaxed. Now it's nice, there's no ripples, it's nice and flat, and it's secure on the curve. So now you can see the blue contrast where I had sewn it from the other side. I am now going to carefully just sew and finish the curves. Just around, everything is nice and flat. Joining my stitch. It's complete. Then I will do the same on the other curve. You can see here, I don't really need this pin anymore. So I'm going to just take that out and just readjust, make sure that everything's just nice and flat. The flatter I get this, the more comfortable it is going to be when I wear it. I don't need a lot of space between the edge of the shield and the stitch line because it's just going flat. So I would make a second copy of this so that in my process sample, I can just hold this one up to explain the processes to my participants in my sewing class. The other elements that I could add is stickers, so I can show this is process 1, this is process 2, so that a facilitator, even if they themselves are not a sewer, they could explain the process to somebody. I'm going to pretend that this is my second process sample, so I'm going to continue what I would do for that third process sample. We have, in review, we have stitched the front and back with this seam. Then we have affixed the shield in place. The next part will be to make the side waist seam. Just before I do that, while this underwear is nice and flat, I like to take the opportunity to trim the wings. Because I'm not needing snaps, I don't actually need all of this to really wrap around the underwear. So I'm going to custom cut this to follow the curve of my underwear. This is the easiest time to do it while the underwear is still not attached at the waist. And so I'm going to just go and trim as I like the actual over part of the wing, because this is all the protection that I really need. Okay. It gives, I would say, about 2 centimeters, and that is just going to allow it to roll over gently on itself when I pull up that pair of underwear. It creates a nice waterproof whole curve without any additional stitches, and you'll see the beauty of that in our completed sample. Now that I have trimmed that, I can side seam right here and here. And I'm showing the most basic way with a household machine. You could overlock this if you have an overlock, but I'm at the quarter. I'm giving myself a little bit of extra here for a fold over flat seam. So I'm just single stitching this. I always start at the top and make sure that the bottom matches. It just, if you have any type of stretch or lycra in your t-shirt, it just helps with the overall look of the underwear. So it's hard to see because the color is like, but I'm just taking my time and I make sure that the two front and back are nicely arranged so it's not lopsided or whatnot. So they're just, the edges are aligned. And I have about 1 centimeter of seam allowance in my sample. The next part in this process is I'm going to fold over to my desired rise, or my hip rise. And so keeping this seam, I'm going to open and make it flat. Okay. And then I like about a 10 centimeter fold over. You'll see in our other samples, other people like a more higher rise pair of underwear. I like it to be just around my hips, so I'm making this sample to be a hipster. So I am now going to single stitch down the seam and up the seam to get all of this seam to keep it flat. And it's going to have a really nice outcome. There is fancy commercial machines that can do this, but again, we are doing this process sample with the most basic machine so that anybody can make a pair of underwear. Here I go. I am just going down the one side, all the way to the bottom. And then I'm going to turn it with my needle in. If I could, but I cheated. Making it flat, continuing to the other side of that seam. And then I'm going to just drive all the way back up. Get a really nice flat seam. I'm going to do that on the other side. Just carefully folding it so that both of the seams are open. I can double check to see that it's equal with my other one. On the front, the waist is coming just to the top of where the shield is. This is my preferred hip rise, but this pattern is so customizable. It's very easy to have a higher waist or a lower waist as you want. Down, in, turn, needle in, turn. If I have some thread, trim it. So the outcome of that is I have a nice pair of underwear that is seamless. I don't require to have it folded over. If you want to fold it over and have a stitched leg, you're welcome to do that. But I've just kept it very simple. A t-shirt doesn't ravel, so it can be a seam free. You have your flat seam here. If you have overlock, you can do that. It's not necessary to stitch down the entire waist. This particular one just has the extra fold over as loose. doesn't affect the underwear in any way. And that is the final process sample. So in my sessions, I have examples of all of the ways from this shiled flat all the way onto a completed pair of underwear. And I put little labels so that then my facilitators can hold up an example and explain it to the class. I hope this video helps. Thank you so much.